We have our highest self, which is rooted in love and compassion and surrender and joy and fulfillment and creativity. And then we have our ego self, which is rooted in fear, in lack, in scarcity, in overwhelm, in anxiety. And I also want you to compassionately look at this part of yourself, because we all, as humans, we grow up from children wanting to be safe, seen, soothed, and secure. And based on our experiences and our conditioning and the societal standards that we've learned, we all find ways to cope with this, to help make ourselves be safe, seen, soothed, and secure. And we carry this on into adulthood. Welcome to the Permission Slip podcast, where I, empowerment coach, mindset expert, and holistic nutritionist Carmen share with you the tools, conversations, and resources you need to write your own permission slip, take massive action, and become obsessed with your own life. Let's get started. Hello. Welcome back to the Permission Slip podcast. In this episode, we are going to dive into all things Ego Self 101. And if you're like, what the heck are you talking about? Don't worry, I will fill you in. So let's just get right into it. So our ego self, we have two different areas that we can think of here. We have our highest self, which is rooted in love and compassion and surrender and joy and fulfillment and creativity. And then we have our ego self, which is rooted in fear, in lack, in scarcity, in overwhelm, in anxiety. So you can probably relate to the times that you've felt like you've been operating out of your ego self versus your highest self, which is based in love. So let's dive a little bit more into the ego self. And so I want you to start seeing times when this part of you has come out. And I also want you to compassionately look at this part of yourself, because we all, as humans, we grow up from children wanting to be safe, seen, soothed, and secure. And based on our experiences and our conditioning and the societal standards that we've learned, we all find ways to cope with this, to help make ourselves be safe, seen, soothed, and secure. And we carry this on into adulthood, almost subconsciously. Often we're not even aware of the ways that we are soothing ourselves, or of the ways that we are putting up our guard, putting on our armor to make ourselves feel safe, or maybe make ourselves, our identity, feel seen in a certain way. And so I just want you to know that this is a part of all of us, and it makes us who we are. But as we get older and we start a personal growth journey, and we want to become more self-aware and enlightened and take responsibility for our choices and take radical responsibility for our lives, and really step into what God is calling us to do, step into those things that are on our heart, we have to be aware of these parts of us. So our ego self is our false self. It's not really who we are. It's who we've learned to be. And we've normally embodied this for so long that we don't even realize it. For example, I had my 16-year corporate leadership career in finance. And when I left, I thought I was just leaving my career, my successful career. I thought I was leaving the black suit that I wore every day. But what I realized very quickly is that I was leaving my identity. I was leaving the identity that I had built for myself of a successful, powerful businesswoman for 16 years. And I was setting out not on a journey of looking to help people with their health and well-being and coaching in a holistic way. I was really setting out on a personal journey to uncover my true gifts that were inside of me that I've covered up because I was practicing being safe, seen, soothed, and secure in so many ways. And I built an identity and I built a conditioned self in order to do so. So I set out on this journey figuring out, like, who is Carmen? What do I like? What do I desire? How do I respond? And that's really what set me out to read a book over a decade ago that really got me thinking and shifted my perception, which A Course in Miracles says a miracle is simply a shift in your perception. And miracles are natural and they should be happening every single day. And when they're not happening, something has gone wrong. And usually it's when we're relying on our ego self, when we're relying on our own strength. The Course also says, in the Course in Miracles, if you're not familiar, it's just a metaphysical text that I'm a student of. And the Course also says that you have every reason to be fearful and anxious if you're relying on your own strength, AKA your ego self, this conditioned self that you've built up for yourself, which is not your authentic truth on the inside. So your ego self, anyway, the book that I read is based in A Course in Miracles, but it's by Marianne Williamson and it's called A Return to Love. I'll put it in the show notes. If you are ready to be cracked open, to have a shift in your perception, to see a new way to renew your mind and grow closer to a spiritual relationship of your own understanding, then I highly, highly recommend this reading. It's reading that I offer in Flow Academy every course, because it's just an opportunity to start seeing things differently, to start seeing things from the lens of love every day versus seeing things through the lens of fear, which totally shifts things for you and creates so much freedom and inner peace. I'm in awe of how much is available to us. So anyway, going back to our ego self, like, what does that sound like? That sounds like I'm a procrastinator. I wish I was more like that person. I can't do this because of that. This is who I am, right? Like, we've built up these labels and these walls, and this is part of our ego self. And it's not that this isn't part of you, because it is, but it's not the truest, highest version of you. It's just because you've learned along the way something about yourself and you just believed it to be true, even though it's not true. And so we grow up as adults and we don't even realize that we're agreeing to a version of ourselves that is just learned conditioning. I'm going to say that again. We grow up as adults and we don't even realize that we're agreeing to a version of ourselves that's just primarily learned conditioning based on our experiences and our conditioning and the societal standards and our environments that we've agreed to and who we think we need to be or should be versus who we truly are on the inside. And we have an opportunity to unlearn it and choose again and know that you can change is so empowering. And I want you to know that it's not necessarily good or bad, right or wrong, but this is just a part of us. And this part of us is the part that normally reacts versus responding. This is the part of us that gets us into worry and overthinking, overanalyzing, being hypercritical of ourselves or others, being judgmental, never celebrating, never having fun, being too serious, controlling and over planning. And I'm saying all of these things, I hope that you can relate, because those were the things that were happening in my life. And when those things were happening, I had no idea who I truly was on the inside. And so when I left my 16-year career, I really had to step out and figure out who the heck I am. Don't get me wrong. My ego self still appeared and still appears today, but I just know how to work with her a little bit better. And so you can think of your ego self as like this barking dog that you want to tame. So those thoughts, often our thoughts are the same day after day, like 80% of our thoughts are the same day after day. And most of those thoughts are negative. And so those thoughts that are on repeat, yeah, this is like your barking dog. Those are the ones that are coming from your ego self, not of your highest self. And those are the ones that you want to train and tame Because, yeah, your barking dog could step up sometimes to keep you safe, and that might be needed. But most of the time, you want to operate from a place of love and compassion and creativity. And that's your highest self that's within you, that you know when you're in that flow state, when things just feel good, you feel light and free in your body. That is 100% what I'm talking about. So I went to a conference recently, and one of the speakers shared this idea about figuring out who your barking dog is. And now I've done some ego work before where we've actually named our ego. And so what we can do is be like, okay, Sally, Betty, Lakeisha, whatever we decide to name our ego self as that person. So pick a name for your ego. When she comes up, then what happens is you can call her by name and you can have her take a back seat. You can work with her instead of making it bad that she's coming up, instead of being right or wrong, good or bad. You can be like, thank you. My ego self is named Molly. Thank you, Molly. I don't need you right now. You can take a back seat. Now, this idea of the barking dog was to have a visual of the dog that your barking dog would be. And I thought of this, and I want you to think about what your dog would be named and what breed of dog your dog would be. So my barking dog would be a poodle. My poodle does all the poodly things, and she's prim and proper and fits into the mold. And she looks intimidating. If you talk to her, though, she's really nice, but she's probably not going to come up to you. And this was how I was. I'm probably not going to come up to you and start to talk, but if you talk to me, I'm really nice. If you pet me, I'm really nice. But I'm actually all up in my head in comparison and judgment and imposter syndrome and fearful. And so that's why I'm not talking to you. Although on the outside, I look so put together and so confident. And so you probably just think I'm a big bitch, and I am a big poodly bitch. So what is your barking dog? And I thought that was a cool analogy that they shared. So maybe you're a Chihuahua, maybe you're a Rottweiler, Pit Bull, German Shepherd. I was talking to one of my clients about this the other week, and she was a golden retriever. She was faithful. She was all American. You know, she was the good one. She was the responsible one. She was a golden retriever. And so you can kind of think about that and have fun with this. While this is actually a serious topic, because within our conditioning and our subconscious programming, our ego self comes out a lot. And when it does, it causes us to slow down from our dreams and goals. It keeps us stuck. It causes us to show up in our relationships and say and do things that are not of our highest self, that we don't want to do. So we want to be able to work with her, but we can do it in a fun way. So let me share with you 5 ways to recognize when your ego has been activated. And I want to hear from you. So I want you to send me a DM, tag me on your Instagram stories. Let me know what type of breed is your barking dog, and what is her name, and how are you working point. And you are right. That is when your ego is activated. The second time is you find that you're judging or criticizing others. They should do it this way. They should do it that way. I don't understand. Like, you're having maybe a situation at work, and then you go home and you complain and you criticize about people. That is your ego coming out. The number 3 way that you could find this is you become emotionally reactive. And you notice I use the word reactive versus responsive. A response is from your highest self, which usually means you have to take a pause before you actually respond. But your ego self is going to be emotionally reactive when you normally wouldn't be. The 4th way is that you get visibly upset, but you pretend that you're fine. So your ego is protecting you. You're pretending that you're fine, but on the inside, it's really like a struggle and like inner turmoil, 110%. And then later you go and you're so frustrated, you're so hurt, you're so upset, but you actually don't deal with it. Your ego just processes it however it processes it, right? And moves on. And the last way is your ego could just have you detach. You could even be detached and still surrounded by people, but detaching yourself because again, you want to be safe. You want to be seen, you want to be soothed, and you want to be secure. And if anyone is threatening any of those things from you, your ego is going to come out. And detachment could just be detaching and not talking about it. Detachment could be just ignoring it and avoiding it. So those are ways to recognize when your ego is activated. And I just want to end. I want to read a little something to you from the book that I mentioned, A Return to Love. And then I want to share a story because our ego is activated in big ways and in small ways. So your ego could be very well activated before you're going out on a date night, getting together with some couples, and you're getting dressed. And you ask your husband, how does this look? And he just says, it looks good. It looks fine. And so what happens? You take that as it means something about you, that it doesn't look great. And so then you're going to change 12 times because your ego is activated because you're now comparing yourself to all the other women that are going to be there and what's going to happen. And your husband said it just looked fine. So you need to change and do something else. Okay. Have you ever been there? Right. Yeah. Instead of coming from a place of love, having compassion, what if you just ask yourself, do I feel good in this? How does this feel for me? Right. And then going out and telling your husband how amazing you feel in it. Because when you're confident and you're showing up glowing in your highest self and not in your ego, like he's going to be so damn attracted to that. Because guess what? If your ego shows up, guess whose ego is going to be activated? Usually your significant others. And so after you start taking a pause, when you start arguing your point, criticizing others, become emotionally reactive, or you're not sharing or speaking your truth, or you're detaching, when you recognize yourself in one of those scenarios, what you can do is take a pause and check in and see what you need. You can thank your ego self, let them know that you don't need them right now. You can quiet your barking dog. Then you can just ask yourself what you need, give yourself what you need, and then realign with your highest self. There's some of the steps to be able to do that. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So Joel and I have a morning ritual and it's beautiful. We sit out on our balcony. We can see the ocean in Miami Beach and we can see that we watch the sunrise. We normally get up around like 6:30 a.m. So it's so beautiful. He has his devotional and his Bible and he does meditation and prayer. And I have my devotional, my journal, my meditation and prayer practice, my reading. And I had read something this day. And so I told Joel, I was so excited. I was like, wow, sometimes we just sit in silence and sometimes we talk with each other. So I told him, I was like, babe, oh my gosh, can I read this to you? And you know what he said? He said, I don't know, can you? Because technically, grammatically, the word I should have used was may I. So instantly my ego kicks in. I can feel it. I want to become emotionally reactive and say something. And I become visibly upset, but I'm pretending not to be. And I'm thinking in my head how I'm going to continue. What am I going to say to be right, to one up him, to tell him that that was rude? And I was so excited to share this with him. And in that instant, I recognized that my barking dog, my poodle, Molly, was doing all the poodly things. And I needed to check myself because it wasn't about him. He didn't mean to do that. His intention wasn't to be hurtful. And even though the impact was feeling like that in that moment, that he was being critical of me and just of my words that I chose to just take a moment and take a pause and take a few breaths, ask myself what I needed, and I just realigned myself in that moment. I just needed a moment to realign myself because I knew I was placing meaning on something that had no meaning. So A Course in Miracles says nothing has meaning until you place meaning on it. And in that moment, the meaning my ego had placed on it was that he was criticizing me and that he was putting me down and I wasn't worthy of sharing this and he didn't really want to hear it and I wasn't feeling safe or seen at all. But that's not what he meant at all. He was just joking around. And so I took a pause. If you don't notice, I've said this multiple times. This is one of the keys. Pause. What do you need? Check your ego self. Silence your barking dog. Give yourself what you need, and then respond from your highest self. And he noticed I wasn't reading it to him. He goes, well, are you going to read it? And I said, yeah, give me just a moment. So I took a few deep breaths and then I said, okay, I'm going to share it. And I shared it and we had a wonderful conversation and dialogue and contemplated what I was reading. And then later after that was over, and this is an important part for my growth, is to not hold in when I need to share vulnerably or when I'm struggling with something, because when I do, I lock it in this little thing that I call my shame closet, and then it builds up and then it feels heavy. And I've done a lot of work to get that shame out of that shame closet, and I don't want it to feel heavy anymore. So later I told him hey, when you said this, I know you didn't mean anything. Isn't it interesting how parts of us can kick in and we don't even realize it? So this is what happened and this is what I did. And he goes, oh yeah, I was just joking around. And so exactly what I was saying is I placed meaning on it and it meant nothing. On the flip side, I could have reacted instead of responded. I could have let Molly do all her poodly things. And guess what? It probably would have ruined the morning. He would have been in a bad mood, possibly the rest of the day. It would have impacted his day, all because I wasn't checking my own ego self, my own old subconscious wounding and programming based on what I learned, based on my conditioning over time. So I hope that's helpful. It's such a small example, and your ego self can come out in many ways. Think about driving a car. So a couple of words from the book, A Return to Love, is, so the challenge is really for us to love more deeply than we've ever loved before. And I'm adding this in, and that really starts with ourselves. The spiritual path then is simply the journey of living our lives. Everyone is on a spiritual path. Most people just don't know it. And that's the part about being really self-aware of where we are as far as working with our conditioned self and really diving into that spiritual path, that inner knowing, that inner guidance, those gifts that God has given us on the inside that's there, right? The ego uses everything to lead us further into anxiety and overwhelm and overthinking and arguing our point and being right. And our highest self and the spirit within inside us uses everything to lead us to inner peace. And that's where we want to be. So I hope that this was helpful, this Working with Your Ego Self 101. So your homework from this episode is to send me a DM or tag me on your Instagram stories. Maybe there's even an emoji of, I should totally do emoji of Poodle Molly Ego Self, right? Of your barking dog. This is going to be so fun because again, this work can get heavy, but you can make it fun. You can work with it and make it lighter and freer and have more joy in your life just with this one thing. And I think that you'll be amazed in working with your ego self, how it really changes things for you, not only mentally, but physically and with your relationships, with your business, with everything in your life. I mean, we talk about this 2 different weeks in Flow Academy. Flow Academy is our holistic life and leadership certifications for leaders, coaches, and entrepreneurs who want to get certified or learn holistic life coaching skills. And this is big. This is always a big takeaway from Flow Academy. People get so much from doing this ego work, and I know that you will too. So until next week, get out there, start silencing your barking dog and having some fun working with your ego self, knowing it's just a part of you. It's not right or wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with life. It just is. And we need to stop going around placing meaning on things. So sending you a ton of love this week. Talk to you next week.